Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about my week number 2 tight end start or sit decisions for fantasy football in 2021. Inside today's video, I'm going to be going over every single game from Thursday Night Football all the way until Monday Night Football, and I will be telling you guys whether I believe you should start or sit every single notable tight end in each matchup. But before we get on into the video, I would like to ask, if you are new to my YouTube channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, to please make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. Not only is it free, I put out content every single day to help you guys win your 2021 fantasy football championship. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure you hit that like button down below to help boost this video up the algorithm so that more beautiful people like yourself can see today's video. I'd also like to let you guys know that if you would like, you can follow me on Twitter at NotoriousFNTSY. I tweet about all the notable fantasy football news. I also answer questions on there. So if you would like, you can follow me at NotoriousFNTSY. The link to my Twitter is also down below in the description. So without further ado, let's get into it. We begin with the NFC East battle of the New York Football Giants at the Washington Football Team on Thursday Night Football. In this matchup, Evan Ingram is going to be not even listed on the screen because he is not playing in this Thursday Night Football matchup. I was already very nervous with starting Evan Ingram in this game up against the Washington Football Team. So with a downgrade to Kyle Rudolph, I am not very confident at all with starting him, so he will be listed as a sit for this game up against the Washington Football Team. For Logan Thomas, this is an excellent matchup because the Giants defense is just terrible at covering the tight end position. They allowed tons of points to the tight end last season. Noah Fant had a pretty solid game against them last week, so I think Logan Thomas is a relatively easy start this week, in my opinion. Now, obviously, losing Ryan Fitzpatrick is somewhat of a downgrade going from Fitzpatrick to Taylor Heinicke, but it's not a huge drop-off. I believe that Taylor Heinicke is actually relatively good, and he should be able to do just fine this week up against the Giants. Now, he's not a quarterback that I'm looking to pick up in this game and play because I think this is going to be a relatively low-scoring game, but I still think Logan Thomas will be able to get his and potentially score a touchdown up against this Giants defense. Now, we begin with the Sunday slate with the Patriots at the New York Football Jets. Now, last week with the Patriots and the Dolphins, I said to just wait it out a little bit with Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. I believe that one of them will eventually have that fantasy relevance that you can start week in and week out, but I just wasn't going to 100% tell you that I believed it was going to be 100% Jonnu Smith. Now, I said last week, gun to my head, if you had to pick Jonnu Smith or Hunter Henry, I would personally lean with Jonnu Smith, and that was the correct answer. It appears that Jonnu Smith is going to be the lead target out of the two tight ends on the team. Now, can things switch? Can things change 100%? But based upon what we saw last week, I will tell you to start Jonnu Smith here up against a not-so-hot Jets defense, which makes Hunter Henry a sit. Tyler Kroft, the Tomb Raider of the New York Jets, is going to be a sit here. This Patriots defense is very tough, and it doesn't appear that Zach Wilson necessarily loves to throw the ball to the tight end or to Tyler Kroft in this case. Next up, we got the Broncos at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Noah Fant just had a pretty solid game up against the Giants. Now, the Jaguars defense did not look very good at all last week. They made Tyrod Taylor look like an elite fantasy quarterback, and that is far from what Tyrod Taylor is. So I think Teddy Two Gloves, Teddy Bridgewater will have absolutely no problem here slicing up the Jaguars defense. I think Noah Fant could be in for a very big game, especially with Jerry Jeudy now out for some serious time. Will that give a huge bump up in the production, in the target share, in the looks that are given to Noah Fant? I'm not sure, but it definitely does take away a big target on the team, as Jerry Jeudy was likely to lead this team in targets this season. I think Noah Fant here is in for a big game up against the Jaguars. The Jaguars don't really use a featured tight end, so James O'Shaughnessy is listed as the starting tight end for the Jaguars, but you're not really going to be looking to start him because he will not be getting very many looks here up against the tough Broncos defense. Next up, we got the Buffalo Bills at my Miami Dolphins. Now, last week, I said to start Mike Gesicki because Will Fuller was gone. I thought, hey, the target share would be going Mike Gesicki's way, but it didn't. They just tried to run the ball a decent amount. It was a really low-scoring game between them and the Patriots because both defenses are very strong. But here, up against the Buffalo Bills, we have seen it time and time again. Josh Allen loves to put up a million fucking points on this Dolphins defense. I'm a Dolphins fan. Even when the defense was looking elite last season in week 17, Josh Allen just carved us apart. We stood absolutely no chance up against this Buffalo Bills passing attack. So I believe if the Dolphins are going to be able to potentially win this game, Vegas has this at a 3-point favorite for the Buffalo Bills. So they believe that this game is going to be close. And if it is, if the Dolphins are able to fight their way back into the game, I believe that Mike Gesicki will be really involved in this game. But he is a risky start this week and is a guy that if you had other tight ends that are listed as a start in this video, I would probably pivot to the other tight end for the Buffalo Bills. Dawson Knox, one time, if you are with me, is going to be a sit. The Bills don't really utilize a tight end very heavily in this system, so I think Dawson Knox is going to be a sit a majority of the weeks, unless Josh Allen just magically starts throwing to the tight end a lot, or unless it is a matchup where I believe that Dawson Knox will be able to find his way into the end zone. Next up, we got the San Francisco 49ers at the Philadelphia Eagles. In this one, I like both of the starting tight ends. George Kittle is a must-start tight end every single week. You drafted him inside the second or the third round. In some leagues, maybe he fell to the fourth round, but most of the time, people are drafting him in the second or the third round. You're not going to bench that player no matter how tough the defensive matchup is. Now, up against the Atlanta Falcons, the Philadelphia Eagles looked like they had the 85 Bears defense out there, but will that happen this week up against the 49ers? Probably not, with Brandon Ayuk basically put into the doghouse by Kyle Shanahan, meaning that he is going to see a reduced snap count, a reduced workload in this offense, which just gives a further boost up to George Kittle meet Timbers. I'm also going to be starting up Dallas Goedert, who tore the Atlanta Falcons a new asshole. Dallas Goedert looked like the premier tight end on this roster. Zach Ertz did end up getting banged up in that game. It appears that according to Nick Sirianni, he is going to be playing in this week 2 matchup up against the 49ers, but I would definitely prefer to play the starting tight end, the guy who's going to be out there more in Dallas Goedert, and I will be sitting down Zach Ertz, but I do believe had Zach Ertz not have gotten banged up in that game up against the Falcons, he would have been very fantasy relevant. So there will be matchups throughout the year that I think you can actually play the backup tight end in Zach Ertz. Next up, we got the LA Rams at the Indianapolis Colts. Here I am going to be starting up Tyler Higbee. Now, last week in that masterful game the Rams played up against the Chi-Town Bears, Tyler Higbee wasn't ultra involved. Now, I wouldn't say he was a terrible start on the week, right? Because he put up some decent points, and he wasn't going to be the reason why your fantasy team lost. But he also wasn't the reason why your fantasy team was going to win that matchup. The Indianapolis Colts got carved up a little bit by Mr. Gerald Everett. Russell Wilson did really good, as did DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. I expect the Rams to be able to put up big points in this game up against the Indianapolis Colts, and I think Tyler Higbee will be relatively involved in this winning game. For the Colts, it seems like they don't have a tried and true starting tight end. Sure, they have Jack Doyle. They also have my boy Mo Money, Mo Alley Cox. But who's the real starting tight end? Who knows? Carson Wentz doesn't look 100% in my eyes. This Colts offensive line looked atrocious. So I don't really trust Jack Doyle here. I don't trust many Colts players in this game. Next up, we got the turn down your volume real quick. We got the Las Vegas Raiders at the Pittsburgh Steelers. If you guys have ended up enjoying this video thus far, make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below as well as the like button. For the Raiders here, I like Darren Waller. The game plan of the first 3 quarters of the game for the Raiders going up against the Baltimore Ravens on Monday night was basically to just throw the ball to Darren Waller. Darren Waller saw, I believe, 20 fucking targets on Monday night. 20 targets. Most receivers don't see that. That is an insane target share on a team. Do I believe that will go down this week? Probably. But Darren Waller is the focal point of this Raiders offense, I should say, and I believe that he is going to play quite well up against the Steelers defense. I will be sitting down Eric Ebron. I talked about this last week in the matchup between the Steelers and the Buffalo Bills in this exact video from week number 1. And I said that, hey, I think Eric Ebron does have the potential to be a week in and week out starter if Pat Freiermuth, the tight end that they drafted in this year's draft, was not very involved, then Eric Ebron could be a fringe starter week in and week out, a streaming option depending on the matchup. Now, it appeared, at least from week 1, that Freiermuth was just involved enough to kind of screw Eric Ebron out of some usage, which will basically make him irrelevant in fantasy football. This is a great matchup up against the Raiders, but I do not trust Eric Ebron here. Next up, we got the Cincinnati Bengals at the Chi-Town Bears. Now, for some reason, the Bears in the offseason did not get rid of Jimmy Graham. Jimmy Graham is not a bad tight end in any way, but it seemed like this was going to be the year where they let Cole Kmet actually be the guy. And they are, but Jimmy Graham is still he's still there. He's still going to get some work. I think Cole Kmet is in for a solid matchup here up against the Bengals, but it is certainly risky with Jimmy Graham looming around on the team, so I will be starting Cole Kmet and sitting Jimmy Graham. CJ Uzomah for the Cincinnati Bengals. Joe Burrow doesn't really feed a tight end, at least at the NFL level, so I don't think Uzomah really has much value in this game up against the Bears. The Bears defense did not look very good in my opinion. Maybe that's because the Rams offense looks very good and we'll see maybe Joe Burrow get shut down in this game, but I'm not too sure about that. I think the Bears defense is on the decline. Next up, we got the Houston Texans at the Cleveland Browns. Now, last week, I was clamoring for Austin Hooper because I thought he had a great matchup up against the Kansas City Chiefs defense. Because up against the Kansas City Chiefs, you can't just run the ball a million times, which is the Cleveland Browns game plan, because eventually the Chiefs are going to fight their way back into the game, which is exactly what happened. Now, Baker Mayfield threw for 300 plus yards, but he didn't throw a single touchdown, and he threw one INT. Austin Hooper was the tight end technically to start of that game, but David Njoku was still very involved. So starting Austin Hooper here, even in a positive matchup up against the Texans, I expect a lot of running from the Browns, and I expect them to run all over the Houston Texans. I'm also going to be sitting down Jordan Atkins of the Houston Texans. It doesn't appear that they have a featured tight end as well. Next up, we got the New Orleans Saints at the Carolina Panthers. Juwan Johnson was an interesting pickup for this week because we saw him score not one, but 2 tugs last week up against the Green Bay Packers defense. But I would tell you, hey, on the waiver wire video, I told you guys to pick him up because I think he's a fine stash. But I want to wait maybe one more game. If he scores again against the Panthers, if he gets more usage here up against the Panthers, then I'm all aboard the Juwan Johnson fucking bandwagon. Because he looked super involved in the red zone offense, and Adam Troutman did not, but Adam Troutman did see more targets than Juwan Johnson. I'm interested to see what happens here for the Saints as a whole, because in week number 1, they just beat down the Green Bay Packers. The Packers got hit into the next year. They stood absolutely no chance, and Jameis Winston barely threw the ball in that game. Typically, you're used to seeing Jameis throw the ball like 45 times a game. I believe he only threw the ball 20 times in that game up against the Packers, which is not the usual when you play the Packers and you're having a tit-for-tat, back-and-forth, shot-for-shot game. That's just not what happens. The Green Bay Packers got absolutely skull-fucked in that matchup by the Saints. So when we see an uptick of targets, does that mean that Adam Troutman is the more likely starter for fantasy football, or will it be Juwan Johnson? I'd like to see it this week, but I think Johnson was a fine pickup. I'm just waiting to see this game against the Panthers before I clamor and claim that you guys need to start him week in and week out. And Sam Darnold's man with the similar name as him, Dan Arnold, Sam Darnold and Dan Arnold of the Carolina Panthers. Here, I'm going to be sitting down Dan Arnold as well. Next game here, we got the Minnesota Vikings at the Arizona Cardinals. Now, some people may be very, 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 very nervous to the 12th power about the Cardinals just destroying the Vikings. The Cardinals defense looked like the best defense in the NFL on Sunday. Ryan Tannehill stood virtually no chance up against the rush of Chandler Jones. J.J. Watt was there. It was so crazy. It was like, wow, this Cardinals defense looks legit up against a Titans team that I thought was going to be able to keep up with them, if not easily beat them in that game. And that's not what happened at all. The Cardinals were all over Ryan Tannehill. Now, that should be mostly attributed to the offensive line being completely and utterly dog shit, because Ryan Tannehill didn't even have much of a choice or much of a chance, because he's standing there, the ball is snapped, and literally half a second later, Chandler Jones is hitting this guy with an RKO out of nowhere like his name was Randy Orton, and he's on the ground. Like, what the fuck was he supposed to do? This game up against the Vikings, I expect the Vikings offensive line to maybe at least slow down Chandler Jones and this Cardinals defense. I think Tyler Conklin in a deeper league is worth a start here up against the Cardinals, and I'm going to be sitting down Max Williams because Kyler Murray doesn't really throw the ball to the tight end. Next up, we got the Atlanta Falcons at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Last week, if you started Kyle Pitts expecting a high-scoring game like I personally did, you were completely wrong. You were so wrong. The Falcons didn't, and I was so wrong too. I'm not even making fun of you. I thought that was going to be a tit for tat, a kind of like, maybe not exactly like the Cowboys versus the Bucks game, but you get what I'm saying, where one team scores, then the other team fights back, and it's a back and forth affair. But instead, this was a slaughter, a murder on the gridiron by the Philadelphia Eagles. Can the Falcons bounce back? Maybe. Maybe. Kyle Pitts, though, you drafted him so early, there's no way you're sitting him, unless, of course, this offense turns to complete shit, right? Like where Matt Ryan doesn't turn it around, because the Falcons offense actually looked relatively solid early on in the game, and then after those first couple of drives, everything went wrong. So maybe in week number 2, we see the Falcons look a little bit better, but this is certainly a tough matchup up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Gronk going up against the Falcons. Now, Gronk, on a season-long standpoint, I expect it to be all right. Last year, we saw a lot of Gronk being used to block, him not really being used to be the Gronk from the past in fantasy football, where he was like a top 5 tight end year in and year out. And a lot of people were drafting him as the number 1 tight end. That was just not the case in Tampa Bay. But in the Super Bowl, in the playoffs, Gronk was looking like vintage New England Patriots Gronk. And then going into this season, I was like, you know what? Maybe that's possible. Maybe it isn't. I'm fine drafting Gronk late rounds, but don't expect too much. And week 1, I expected something, and he did everything. He played amazing up against the Cowboys. This is a bad defense in the Falcons. I'm definitely firing up Rob Gronkowski here in this game up against the Falcons. Next up, we got the Les Titans at the Seattle Seahawks. Anthony Firkser was one of the biggest hype trains of the early offseason of fantasy football. By the time we were in August, basically everyone hopped off the train. No one was on the Anthony Firkser bandwagon after they traded for Julio Jones. So Anthony Firkser, unless he scores a touchdown, he's pretty irrelevant for fantasy football. Gerald Everett, I called for it last week up against the Indianapolis Colts. Everyone was telling you to sit him. I said, start that motherfucker. Throw him in your lineup. He's going to play good. And we saw what happened here. He gets an even softer matchup up against the Tennessee Titans defense. I love Everett in this matchup. Next up, we got the Dallas Cowboys at the LA Chargers. Now, just like how I believed that game was going to be a back and forth affair between the Eagles and the Falcons, that's what I believe here with the Cowboys and the Chargers. LA Chargers tight end Jared Cook looked pretty solid last week up against the Washington football team, and not so hot of a matchup. So here, up against the Cowboys, where Gronk just beat them down from the tight end position, I think Jared Cook is a must-start tight end this week. Blake Jarwin, maybe... No, I'm just kidding. You're not going to be starting him or Dalton Schultz. I don't think either of them are the clear tight end 1 here. Maybe Gallup missing some time through the next couple of weeks elevates Jarwin or Schultz to fantasy relevance, but I'd rather see it before I clamor to start him up against the Chargers defense. Next up, we got the Sunday night football matchup between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens. Mark Andrews, yikes. Last week, I expected him to be very involved up against the Raiders. Instead, it was the Sammy Watkins and Hollywood Brown show. Will that happen again up against the Chiefs? I'm not sure. I think Mark Andrews is a must-start regardless, though. You drafted him so early. You don't want to run away just based off of a 1-game sample size up against the Raiders. For the Chiefs, obviously, you start Travis Kelce. You probably drafted him in the first round. If not, you got lucky and got him in the early second round. Up against the Ravens, we saw what Waller just did to them. Go ahead and fire up Travis Kelce. Final game here, we got Monday Night Football between the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers. TJ Hawkinson looked electric up against the 49ers, just as predicted in the offseason that, hey, this is the only motherfucker on the team that is going to want to catch the ball besides DeAndre Swift. TJ Hawkinson was getting destroyed by targets. He was getting pounded with the targets. He was getting so many targets, and I believe the same thing will happen here up against the Green Bay Packers. Robert Tonyan, just like the rest of the Packers, completely sucked ass for fantasy last week. They had a very down game. Not even a very down game. Probably the worst game that they have had in years. They looked terrible. They looked like they stood no chance. They benched Aaron Rodgers for Jordan Love. Aaron Rodgers finished outside of the top 32 at the quarterback position in fantasy football last week. That's how you know things went terrible for the Packers, but I expect a huge bounce back this week up against the Detroit Lions. So you're going to fire up Mr. Big Bob Tonyan, Robert Tonyan here of the Green Bay Packers. Thank you guys all so much for watching this video. If you did end up enjoying, please make sure that you hit that like button down below, as well as that subscribe button. I would appreciate it greatly. I hope you guys did enjoy this video, so thank you guys all so much for watching. I love you guys so much. Thank you for all the support you have shown recently. If you have any questions, please don't be shy. You can ask down below in the comment section. I love you guys. Make sure that you stay safe. As always, goodbye.